in many ways, with their sports figures and all the people that are involved in the selling of the brands.
That's
The
absolutely
sports
right.
heroes, for example.
But their message is everybody can do this, and they use indeed the stories of people that are now unreachably good, such stars that we think that they were never like us, and they basically bring that back to, well, actually what they did was they trained and they had thought about it and they worked and they made it important. But getting back to the people now, yes, the sort of celebrity endorsement strategies have been there forever. Today, what people are seeing, what every company is seeing, that all their employees are actually part of the service machine. And through social media, consumers are reaching these companies at every which way that's possible. Not just through the telephone line, we used to all have 800 numbers, emails we got, then it started to be chat rooms, and now companies are literally interfacing with consumers across a myriad of contact points. And there's a lot of marketers saying, well, I'm not sure how to do that yet. I'm not sure that all my people are trained to do that. And what we think is great about it, it actually forces you to go all the way back and say, well, hang on, what is our purpose as a company? What is our purpose as a brand? And if everybody in the company truly understands and lives that, you don't need to orchestrate as much. You can empower and you can trust people to do the right thing. So it's about creating clarity on the vision and the purpose of what we stand for. But a company that we both know here in New York City, Best Buy, what they've done is they've actually said, well, all the people walking around the store, there's many moments that they don't have anything to do. There's no client to talk to. They actually go into the social media space with their phone or the computers that are around the store, and they start answering questions from people that have been posted in lots of other spaces. And there's no script. I mean, there's some things you can't do, of course, but there is really no script in saying how to do this. They trust their people. That if the purpose, what we want to stand for as Best Buy is this, now please do it in the way that you feel fit. It reminds me of, I think it was Ritz-Carlton in the old days that used to say to all their employees, you may spend up to $1,000, no questions asked, to satisfy one of our hotel customers. Afterwards, come and give us the receipt, tell us why you did it, but you have carte blanche for $1,000 or lower. Trusting people.
Now, as you were speaking, I was thinking when you were speaking that a brand is an experience as well. I was thinking of when you walk into an Apple store, for example.
Yes.
That's an experience by itself, right? From the moment you enter and you're met with the salesperson who answers your questions, shows you around. You don't even have to go to the checkout counter.
It's
all taken care of. And I think they're the pioneer in so many areas.
Absolutely.
Not only the innovation of their product, but the innovation of their
total
service and
experience.
marketing, the total experience.
I truly believe, I mean, I don't think by coincidence, Apple last week pushed, who was it? Google off the throne of the strongest brand in the world. So the listing came out last week of the strongest global brands, and Apple became number one. I think you're completely right. It is about totally understanding that experience. Companies used to think about market share, what percentage of the soft drinks market do I have? Coca-Cola used to say that to itself. And they changed it about 10 years ago. They said, no, we need to think bigger. It's about the percentage of throat. Anything that anybody drinks, we should be able to compete for. And I think they went a step too near. Because if you go a step further, it's the percentage of share of experience in a relevant way. Where does it make sense for our brand to add value, to help consumers? And Nike and Apple are basically blazing the trail.
And once you reach a critical mass, I think that you become unstoppable. I remember a story that the former president of Coca-Cola used to tell, once asked, so what's your vision of success? Coca-Cola has become successful. And at that time, this is almost 20 years ago, he said, my vision is that there's a couple visiting New York City from Botswana or Burundi, and they're standing in Times Square, and they look at this big sign, Coca-Cola, and the husband turns to the wife and says, they have Coca-Cola even here.
Well, there's global for you. It's so interesting because, there's a lot of, talk about leadership philosophy for a moment. I think that the leaders at these global organizations, they're really going through a very, very challenging time. You asked, why did we write the book? That's why. Because they grew up and their boss always knew more than they did.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't know, they went to their boss grudgingly and said, how do I do this? And for the first time ever, there's marketing leaders. I've interviewed, you don't know how many CMOs, and one of them said it nicely to me. He said, I used to feel like a bowler. I could see the pins, I was experienced and trained, I had the ball, I knew how to swerve it, and if I did the right paces, I knew roughly how many pins I would knock down. He said, today it feels to me like pinball. I push the button and I pray to God that something that I'm trying to hit gets hit.
Let's hope it works.
Yeah. But that whole sense of I'm now no longer the know-it-all boss, I think is a very, very healthy leadership challenge, because it forces you to now become interdependent with actually the youngest employees that are naturals in this space. They don't know differently. And to say, hey, how do you use this? How do you think we should be working? And it's so important because I was at a discussion last Friday with Michael Porter, coming from Harvard, and I was astonished. He presented for 2 hours to the top 50 chief marketing officers of the world. And his story was basically, guys, when Friedman said all we need to focus on is profit, he did us a big disservice, because it's about value and it's about shared value. I mean, these are his terms, but I completely agree. We as businesses have basically abdicated from taking the costs that we incur by pollution and so forth, the pain we create by outsourcing our work to China or other places, and basically disconnecting from the communities that we were part of. And when you start to think about the real cost, because there is a cost somewhere, if we don't provide health insurance, somebody's health doesn't increase. In fact, it decreases, so the costs are up. Who's bearing those? And to start thinking, he was really, and I was so impressed by that, he said, we have to, as marketing leaders, as business leaders, we have to see that the value is a much bigger one than just that share of market.
There's an emerging consciousness in the consumer, where if I'm in a store and I see 2 products and they're about the same price and they look equally good, and they probably are equally good, I want to know which one maybe helps a community somewhere in the developing world.
Exactly.
Or are they eco-intelligent?
Exactly.
Or
do they provide benefit to gay partners?
To gay partners.
Whatever is important to you.
Whatever is important to me. And if I have the choice, then obviously I'll choose the one that has more value to the world, the intangible value to the world that I don't see in the product itself. And I think everybody is kind of realizing that, and some people are not being authentic enough, but they're still seeing the PR value of that.
Yeah.
So they'll say, okay, if you buy our product, we'll be doing this and we'll be doing that.
Well, we work only with very big companies. And what I've found, one, is that none of those companies were created, I gave the examples before, to make a lot of money. There's always a founder there. When you go back to their roots, it always was about something special. I think that's why they're big. Now, what has happened in many companies is that at one point the bean counters took control and decided that all the other things weren't important anymore. And whether it was Unilever, Sony, or anybody else, at certain junctures, they kind of forgot or deprioritized.
The original vision.
Exactly. So often it is just about people going back, which is highly motivating, to their purpose. I think you might be doing business leaders a little injustice. What I hear is that these companies, in fact, especially these companies, because they are so big, they have to assume transparency. If any one employee anywhere in the world fouls up, it's in the New York newspapers tomorrow, and if you work for that company, it was your fault. So they actually have a far bigger interest in doing this well and creating transparency, not some sort of short-term, gimmicky, look, we're great on low sugars, but actually we don't tell you about the fat. What I see is a genuine, not everybody plays along, of course, but what I see is a genuine movement. I mean, if the Michael Porters of this world, and he took ownership too, he said, listen, I'm part of the Harvard board, I work with the dean. We created the analysts that say, I don't want to hear about that. Tell me what
Profit.
your ROI is.
Bottom line.
Exactly. So they take real responsibility there. And we are going into a, I think, very exciting 20 years or so, where as a generation, we have to create